Hey, it's Andre and Sean. Today we are talking about getting started with the system. We refer to this as the bridge building masterclass, and it's really the idea is to understand where you are relative to where you want to go, and then build a bridge between, build the metaphorical bridge between here and there. I'm going to start off with a quick overview of what you see on your screen. Andre's sitting back, relaxing, probably having an espresso. He's going to give me just enough rope to hang myself with, and then he'll jump in and tell you the things that I should have said, and then we'll
Sounds good
just
to
see where the
me.
conversation leads. Right? These are none of these conversations are scripted. Right? We work back and forth on the imagery. We understand. We have conversations about really what we want to talk about, but we're both just as excited to see what emerges as everybody else. So it's always fun. So we'll go left to right here, but having said that, I'm going to violate it immediately. I want to start in the middle first, just to introduce an idea. You'll see there's an A and a B on the screen. This is an idea that we've both learned from Robert Fritz, who's written some incredible books, really, just profoundly interesting thinker. And Fritz brings this idea of structural tension to the creative process. So between A, which is where you are right now, and then B, which is this desired future state, the idea is that we're creating this natural tension and it's the tension that pulls us toward that desired future state. And if we get that tension right, and Fritz refers to these as tension resolution systems, if we get that tension right, we're pulled from A to B. If we get it wrong, and Fritz would call that a resolving uh, system, where the tension goes from one point to another sort of naturally. Um, where we get that wrong is if we have what he refers to as an oscillating structure, which is it's the idea, it's the different the metaphors he uses. It's the car is the one, the resolving gets you from A to B. The rocking chair, there's lots of motion, but you never go anywhere. It's sort of that oscillating back and forth. So if we have an A and a B, but we're pulled back toward A for some reason, so we make 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. We're trying to avoid that. That would be oscillation. There's a lot of motion, but not really any progress. So we'll get into the details about what that looks like and the precision required to get there in this conversation. Um, but that central idea from Fritz is really, really, really important. Anything to add to that, Andre? I know we're both long-term fans of Fritz and his work on structural tension.
I think the only thing I'll add is we have written fairly extensively about Fritz and what you're seeing in front of you. So as part of this, we can link out to at least there's two long emails that are archived on our site that we spoke about this in detail. So we can just link out to that if you want to go a bit deeper. But we're going to cover most of it now anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because Fritz is such a deep thinker, but the A to B tension, we also create that for our readers. We talk about that extensively. But there's also, we can use it for ourselves. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of utility, because if we structure it well for our audience facing material, it pulls the audience's attention forward. When we structure it equally well for our internal thinking, for our planning, it pulls our attention forward and our action forward. So it's just a profoundly interesting idea. All right, so you'll see on the far left here, we have this, there's a 3-part drawing. It's audience, offer, and economics. Now, if you ask 99 out of 100, or sorry, if you ask 100, uh, you know, skilled marketers, if you boil it all down to, what does it come down to? Like what remains, what's irreducible, and what you'll generally get here is some variation of audience and offer. If you have those two things, you have a business. Now, our dear friend Jack Bourne created many years ago. I think he called it the profit triangle. But Jack added this third component, which is economics. Right? If you have an audience and an offer, but the economics don't work, meaning you're spending $3 to earn $2. Um, that doesn't work. We call those small fortune businesses. You have to start with a large fortune, and then you end up with a small fortune. But these three components, once we understand them, we realize they're essentially irreducible, and that's really important because If we just said to you, hey, let's have you figure out, what's your current reality, what's objectively true, just describe it to us, you wouldn't really know any place to start. You could tell us a million things. You could spend hours or days. And what the audience offer in economics does is it gives us a place to put our stake in the ground to say, okay, let's work through each of these systematically. So for example, when we're talking about current reality, the first question we want to know is, do you have an offer? And it's not to get into weeds here, we've talked about this in the system, but an offer is not a product. An offer is an expression of a product. So a product could be, the system is a product, but the offer that we made in early February 2022, with the first time that we presented it to our audience, that offer, it contained the product, but the offer was different. It was the lowest price we would ever offer it, for example. There was a certain amount of time when that was available. And there were lots of things. There was the people who joined were the first group, and there are lots of things that made that an offer. So the first question we want you to answer to orient yourself to your current reality is, do I have an offer? And do I have more than one? Like really get into detail about what is the offer side of your business. Anything to add to that, Andre, before we can kind of jump around here and keep digging in, but I'm getting already tired of hearing my own voice.
No, yeah, I mean, there's, depending on where you're at, and again, I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but these questions can be different depending on where you're at. And so I think where Sean was heading maybe was, do you have an offer is a question you would ask somebody in the very beginning, because, if they haven't got an offer, do you have an audience? No, there's no audience. So therefore there's no economics. So if all three of these things is nothing, well, that's going to inform what you're going to be doing to get to your B. If you already have a business like ours, so do you have an offer? Yes. Do we have an audience? Yes, we have a baked-in audience. So those dynamics are going to inform decisions, downstream decisions that we're going to make. So, do you have an offer? It can be yes and no. And do you have an audience? Can be yes and no. And it's, I think depending on where you're at, opportunities will arise. But again, I think I'm jumping a few steps ahead now. So I'll shut up and you continue.
Well, I mean, you've hinted at the sort of the most interesting, well, you've hinted at an interesting point that we need to make initially. If the answer to these questions, do you have an offer, do you have an audience, if it's no to each of those, then the what to do next is very easy. Go start with a durable business and go through that. And you really don't even have to finish watching this masterclass, because that was designed to be is designed to be a step-by-step progression from zero to something. The idea that you have no offer, no audience, there can't be economics without those two things. So that's the place to start. Where if that's not you, if you've done something, then what we're really trying to get to with current reality is a very clear assessment about both the sort of the overall 10,000 foot view of these questions about offer, audience, and economics, and a very granular, precise, clear understanding. And the key to making this work is that it has to be 100% objective reality. Right? This is not wishful thinking. This is not, and working with clients, I worked with clients for 21 years. Working with clients, I can tell you that everybody introduces wishful thinking into current reality. When you say, hey, what's going on with your business right now? Then what you get are some variations of things that are 60 to 80% true. And when you dig in, you realize, okay, that wasn't quite right, or this isn't exactly, this is, partly the thing that was described is finished and partly it's in progress. What we want for your current reality, excuse me, is you to be able to, I've said this in many other places, I'll say it again here. You need to be able to describe your business on a single sheet of paper with a crayon. It needs to be that clear. And it could be, you could say, okay, I sell a $99 course that I deliver over 7 emails. And so there's your offer, and I deliver it and I sell it on Facebook or whatever it is. Like, you need that absolute precision. And what we want you to be able to come away from this initial understanding is a crystal clear understanding of what is actually true for you right now, not what you hope to be true in a week, but what is true for you right this moment. Now, if you have an established business, maybe you have 10 offers. Maybe you have a front end offer that generates customers at break even. So you sell something for, say, $97, and that $97 you make back in average order value, so that you're getting customers for free, essentially. And that may be true for you. You may get 80% of that back. But you need to, that's the economics of it. But you may have, let's just say, let's go through some different levels of sophistication. You may have 0, in which case just go do the durable business. Or you may have a single offer and a single audience and a single traffic source, and the economics on that are crystal clear. You spend $5, you make $6. Okay, perfect. Now you know your current reality, but we want you to be able to get to this level of precision where, if we were to say to you, tell us about your offer, you'd say, okay, well, we have 6. We have 3 front end offers at this price point, and each in there for slightly different audiences, and then each of those front end offers leads to the single core offer. Great. Now tell me about the economics. Okay, the front end offer is $97. The core offer is $497. We're break even on customer acquisition in this channel, and our lifetime value is X in 6 months from our core offer. Excellent. Now we understand. Now we are oriented to what's true. And this is the hardest part. It seems like it should be the easiest part because we're just describing something. But for some reason, this seems to be the hardest part. And if you can't do this, and when I say can't, I mean like right now in this moment, like this is just not a skill set that you have. You absolutely need to be able to do this. If there's one thing that I've seen happen over and over and over again, is that when somebody's pinned down, meaning you ask a question and they say, okay, well, and I've seen this happen many times in various groups that I've been in, where someone will say, okay, we're here. We just did X, Y, Z. We just did a webinar, and this is what happened. And it's like, okay, well, tell me like the economics. How much did it cost to get the traffic? How much did you make on the offer in the first 30 days? What happened in the next 30? Like, we start asking questions, and people get sort of a glazed over look. And if that's true, that means you don't understand what your business is doing. If you don't understand it, you can't affect it. So I hope we're instilling on you, meaning me, because I can't shut up apparently, but what I hope that we instill on you today, first and foremost, is that you have to be able to describe your business with precision and clarity along these 3 dimensions. What is my offer or offers? What is my audience, or who are my audiences? And that can be email list. It can be sources of traffic, like organic traffic, paid traffic, like what offers, audiences, and what are the economics of my business? What am I spending where? What does that do for me? Is it to acquire a customer? Is it the infrastructure of the business? What are all those things? And then what is the economics? What are the economics of each of those things? So when organic traffic comes in, how much, like what does that do for my business? Is that driving all of my business? Like, these are the questions we need to answer. Okay, now I'm back to shutting up for a second so you can say something, because I feel like I'm starting to go on a rant here.
Yeah, I just want to perhaps highlight one thing though. So there's going to be a spectrum of people listening to this now, and some of them, their current reality, their audience, well, their traffic source is not going to be paid. Maybe their traffic source will be just organic traffic. It just shows up, and there's an offer, and there's economics. and you're obviously growing an audience, but there's no paid traffic sources. That's fine. That's still your current reality. If your current reality includes paid traffic sources, then that's also part of that current reality. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that you don't have to have a paid traffic source for this all to kind of play out. Your current reality is how it is right now.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, and it's important to know. I mean, we've certainly spoken to many people over the years, and this who are in this situation where 90% or more, sometimes 100% or more of what drives the action in their business is organic traffic, over which they have some measure of control sometimes, or no control. Right? That's it doesn't. This is the current reality is not. This is not about judgment. This is not about what should you be doing. It's not about. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It's just what is actually true for you right now. Maybe you bought a business and the business had an email list with 100,000 names on it, and the previous business owner maybe didn't treat that audience very well. So you have an audience, but maybe maybe it is responsive, maybe it's not responsive. It doesn't matter. None of this is should. Like what should be true. It's just what is true, and it's a really important distinction that we don't introduce judgment in here. And we all want to do that as humans. We seem to have an infinite capacity to introduce judgment in things. Where we'll say things like, "Well, I get 90% of my traffic from Google organic, and I know that's not great." Well, who cares, right? Like, just say the objective part first to get this to current reality. Is it, using this bridge building metaphor, what we're trying, you can imagine yourself on one side of a chasm or a canyon, or if you're doing a short-term planning, maybe it's just a tiny little creek or a river, but you're on one side of it, and on the other side is where you're going. And you're trying to bridge the distance in between to know what to do to get from A to B. If you're not honest about and clear about where A is, how do you build a bridge to B? You just can't do it. So this is none of this is about judging yourself or judging relative to where others are. It's everything about current reality is just you saying to yourself, here's what is true for me. And you may find that that offer, audience, and economics aren't quite enough, right? Because there are other factors too, especially if you have an established business. Maybe you have, and some of this might get categorized under offer, like on qualitative factors. But one conversation we've had probably an infinite number of times in our lifetimes are people who are on the product launch train and want off. That's a very common conversation. So current reality in one of those examples might be we have an audience, we have an offer, and that offer, we make that offer 3 times a year, and it's super stressful and whatever. Excellent. Just get that into your description of your current reality, because that may be the desired future state, may be a qualitative change. It doesn't always have to be more. When we get into desired future state, we'll talk about the distinctions between more and better. But we've said this over and over. I'm going to say it one more time before we move on. You have to be honest with yourself. Like this is just, think of yourself like a reporter. You've arrived at the scene, and you're taking stock. Like, what do you see at the scene? It appears that $100,000 in revenue comes in every year, and $60,000 of it remains. Okay, that's a high level understanding of the economics. There's no description about should that happen. Is it good? It just is. Like that's what when you arrive on the scene and you see the business, that's what is happening. And there's an email list and it has 3,000 people on it. Okay, should it be 10,000? It doesn't matter. Should it be 100,000? None of that matters. It just matters what is. And this ability to honestly assess the situation is such a critical skill. And sadly, it's rare. I very rarely worked with clients who could sit down and say, here's what's going on. Even at the offer level, very rare. This is a superpower. If you develop this ability to say, here's what's going on, or here's what went on last month with accuracy. All right, anything to add to current reality before we jump to desired future reality?
No, I think this is going to get exciting now that we share this idea of going from A to B and what B represents, because it may not be. I don't think it's obvious. I think people could have the understanding of what the future state may be. I don't think is what we're going to unpack now. So I think this will be an exciting piece that's going to come up next.
From your mouth to God's ears, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we get into desired future state, one of the bigger challenge, I guess there are two primary challenges that we should put up right up front. One is getting the time frame right, and then the other is getting the scope right. And just to be clear, you'll probably get both wrong most of the time, and that's okay. I mean, it's one of the things we've talked about in the past, I think, is this idea of plan the verb versus plan the noun. Plan the noun is you have this written document that is this is going to happen, or checklists and all these things. I mean, if that lights you up and it works for you, great. But plan the verb, like the act of planning, that's where so much of the value is. It's the thinking through the planning, and yes, the execution. But don't get caught up in like, okay, I think 6 weeks is an ideal time frame, and in 6 weeks I'm going to have this incredible new reality, and 6 weeks arrived and I only got 20% of what I wanted to do. I mean, there's an entire bias, psychological cognitive bias called the planning fallacy. Like you're not alone. I mean, we routinely as a species cannot accurately plan things from a time perspective and what we'll accomplish. So the first, I guess, the place to start with your desired future state is to try to really understand for you, like, what time frame feels exciting. Then there's some natural rhythms to planning. Annually is good. Annual, I would recommend that everybody not start off with an annual plan. Annual it's too long. You're too detached from the outcomes. It's too easy to get behind. You don't get the immediacy of the payoff. Another common planning increment is a week. I think a week is very tactical. You can get things done in a week and you can see progress, but it's not the inspirational level of okay, I'm going to be in this, like, pulled toward this new reality. It's probably somewhere, the ideal planning time frame for the broadest group of people listening to this is probably somewhere between a month and maybe a quarter at the far end. I would initially recommend, I'm curious to hear what your take on this is too, Andre. I would recommend somewhere in the neighborhood of like 4 to 6 weeks, which to me feels like a natural, like higher level A to B planning. Yes, you might break that into 1 week or 2 week sprints to focus on action, but I like to look out into the future at what something I want to be true that I can move the needle enough that it's exciting, that it pulls me forward, that I want it to be true. A month to 6 weeks feels like a sweet spot to me. I'm curious what feels like a sweet spot for you.
Yeah, I think there's two insights that I had, and one of which is that the duration will probably change or shift as the business is at a different phase or stage or maturity. So if you've got 0 here, so you're going into the durable business, literally everything you do is going to be, it's going to create some positive impact. Whereas later on, when the business is more mature, and you're just tweaking dials slightly, that time frame is likely going to be different in some meaningful way, depending on how many people are on the team, how many people are working to execute on what that what that B looks like. There's, as we know, there's a huge following on the 90-day or the 12-week or the 90-day year. So, but I don't think anything more than a quarter is useful. So the other insight I want to just draw attention to, because it was a big insight for me when I first started to consume Robert Fritz's stuff here. Sean's gone deeper than I have, so you can fill in the gaps here. But I just want to make something clear that may not be clear, and it's this. So your current reality is, as we've just painfully said over the last half an hour, this is where you're at now, and then this piece here, your desired future state, is this piece that's just slightly, ahead, a few weeks ahead, a month or two, maybe 3. When you go from A to B, and at some point B is going to become your current reality, at which point this thing resolves, and then B becomes A. So now your current reality has now progressed. It is no more A anymore. It's actually B, but it's now we're back to A again. And then you plan for the next piece. So this tension resolves at the point at which you've set this little thing in the future. And when you get there, and if you've done everything you've said you're going to do, and everything's worked the way that you hoped it's worked, that now becomes your current reality, and you plan for the next piece. So I don't know if you want to just go a bit deeper on that, Sean, but or did I misrepresent poor Fritz?
I mean, I did a long in-person, virtual, but not synchronous thing with Fritz, and I understood at a much deeper level what he's getting at, but it's funny because it's ephemeral in some way. Like you think you've grabbed onto it, and then 3 minutes later, you're like, I'm not sure I understood it. But it is very much what you just described, which is we're not. I mean, if you think about it, we're naturally drawn to things that are interesting to us in front of us, if they're clear and there's some precision, and that could be. Some people train for marathons, right? That's a very, like, training. Years ago, I trained for a triathlon. Like that's a very clear, like, you can look into the future and say, okay, on this date, I'm going to achieve this thing, and right now I'm not able to do that thing, and between now and then I need to be able to do it. But what's pulling you forward is the vision of race day in that example. And what we're trying to reverse engineer here is not quite that definitive of a point in time, but we still want the same feeling. We want to be pulled toward it, and it's such a challenge. And what you just mentioned is really important too. Is that if we use the marathon example, and if you train for a marathon, and let's say, for the sake of argument, that you give yourself 18 months, that you're currently running, I don't know, 5K on weekends with friends, and you say, I'd love to, in 18 months from now, I would love to be able to run a marathon, complete a marathon. Don't worry about the time or whatever. You just want to complete a marathon in 18 months. Assuming the training goes successfully and you've put the time and effort in, at the end of race day, you're now someone who has run a marathon, right? That's orders of magnitude, 5 orders of magnitude different than the person who ran the 5K and was aspiring to run the marathon. Well, now when you think about, okay, what's the next thing that I want to achieve? You're standing on an entirely different platform. You are now someone who has completed a marathon. That doesn't mean you now need to run an ultra or whatever, but it may be that twice a year you run marathons. I mean, it's the idea that you just communicated, which is, as you make progress becomes your new reality. And that's the entire cycle here. It never stops, unless you choose to sort of step off the the merry-go-round at some point. That every time you make progress, you're a very different person. It's that idea about you can't step in the same stream twice. The stream's not the same, and you're not the same. And this A to B process, this pulling forward. I think the only distinction that I would add there is I don't know if Fritz is. It may be, I don't know if it's just my interpretation, but what I didn't get a sense from him was as much about the finality of it, the clean break of the B. Although now that I think about it, because he focuses so much on creative projects, I guess there is an actual resolution, and that seems to the point that you made. That does seem important. That the A to B journey has resolved. You can say, I have now achieved this desired future reality, or I've reached the point in time I gave myself to do it, and I'm going to reassess my current reality and then create a new desired future reality to pull myself toward that. What we don't want, and this happens enough that we want to caution you against it. What we don't want is A to be vague and B to be vague, so that you're not quite sure where you are, you're not really sure where you're going, and when you get there, it won't necessarily be clear that you've arrived. If you want to create a perfect recipe for not making progress, that's probably it. Those are probably the ingredients that you need to not make progress, because it won't feel exciting. It just won't. All right, let's. Anything you want to throw in there before we get into the meat?
Yeah, let me.
How to do the desired future state?
Yeah, I'll add one extra thing, because as soon as I understood what Fritz was trying to do here, which is what we're trying to explain to you here between A and B, it was such a revelation in the sense that if someone's business, they have no offer, they have no audience, they essentially at zero. So their path through our system would be the durable business. Now, well, then you go into the durable business, and the whole idea behind the durable business is to go from 0 to 100,000, right? So that's roughly it. Well, it's from 0 to something, but ultimately you want to get to 100,000 would be the first big thing, right? Well, B is not 100,000. This is not 0 and that's 100,000. When you look at this thing that we just explained to you now, if you're going through this the first time, B isn't anything close to 100,000. B could be you want your page, you want a landing page built, you want an opt-in page built, you want your emails written, and you want to get your first opt-in. That's B, and that maybe is a 6-week sprint. That's B. B is nothing to do with 100,000. And when you think about it that way, it almost removes overwhelm, because when you're looking at this nebulous thing in front of you, and it's like, how the hell am I going to get to 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million or whatever that fictional number is that you want to try and get to? That is never B. So I think I just wanted to draw your attention to that. And as soon as you get that, it's so liberating, because when you run to get to B, like a few weeks into the future, and you build out all your assets and you put it there and you put this thing live and you get your first opt-in, that's such an amazing feeling, because now A becomes that. So your current reality is now you have all these assets in place. You have a very basic system that is generating leads, and that's amazing, right? So then you will then define, okay, what's B now? Maybe B at that point is 500 people opting in, because you want to increase your certain things, your metrics or your lead flow coming into A. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. So B is not this nebulous thing way into the future. It's always a smaller goal.
Yeah, and you just drew attention to a distinction that I think is really important, which is paying attention to your internal GPS about what motivates you as an individual. There's in broad strokes, very, very broad strokes, there's a spectrum of I don't even know what I would describe it, but certainly there's a spectrum of thought and a spectrum of research and a spectrum of really, I think, just what we're drawn to. And on the one hand, and I'll get a lot of this wrong at the detail level, so just ignore that. But on the one hand, you have the set the bar so low that it's impossible not to achieve it. I think of this as like the tiny little habits, the BJ Fogg stuff, and research backs that up. Like if you can bring the if you can, and this is an idea from, I think Charlie Munger has mentioned this with he and Warren Buffett, that they, I think the phrase he used is something like they never tried to jump over, climb tall fences. They just stepped over, like they kind of stepped over the low fences, and did the easy stuff and just consistently did the fundamentals that were easy. Like that's one side of of a spectrum, and that side seems to, if I'm understanding the research and the ideas well, that seems to work for a lot of people. That if you just make the actions easy enough and you stack them up, it's consistency over intensity. And you do the thing and you make the thing so easy to do that you kind of can't help but do it. And then you chain together a series of those easy things that eventually you wake up one day and you're doing things that from the initial perspective were hard, but now they're easy because you've made them so easy to get there. The other side of that spectrum is this idea that there's a certain threshold at which we want to get engaged in something. It's almost like something has to rise to a certain level where it's interesting enough that we'll do the work. I fall into that camp. I'm not the tiny little habits guy. I can't stand. I understand it intellectually, but I have zero interest in it. It just does not motivate me. So if I tried to make a shorter time frame desired future reality that involved me barely doing anything and finding myself 6 weeks later having achieved this thing that was sort of the sum of me barely having to do, it just doesn't excite me. I just won't do it. It's oddly demotivating to me. I need to have something that for whatever reason, in this, I think I'm certainly in the minority, but I mentioned this just so for each person listening to pay attention, that there's no right way to do this part of the planning. There's only the way that's right for you. Meaning, if you go through this exercise and you're like, okay, I think I'm going to try to create a plan for a month, and I'm going to be very conservative about what I could accomplish, and I'm going to make it so easy to get from here to there, and you find yourself it just doesn't light you up. Try what I like to do sometimes is I try to do something that seems a little stupid. Like that's why I decided to train for a triathlon. For me, it was like, okay, well, I want to get off the couch. All right, great. What should I do? Well, let's do a triathlon. It doesn't make sense on any dimension other than it was extremely motivating for me to do that. So just pay attention to how you respond to that. It's really easy to get it wrong in either direction. It's really easy to make it too easy, and it's really easy to make it too hard. And both of those things can be demotivated. So you're looking for that Goldilocks sweet spot where you're like, you know what? That seems like if I get there, it's going to be exciting. Like that's exciting, but it's not so overwhelming. It's not so scary that I will just abandon all hope. I don't know if anything you want to add to that, because I know you're much more familiar with one side of that equation than I am.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned that. And if you're in a team that's larger than one person, it's good to send one person over barbed wire fences if that lights them up. So Sean goes over all the taller fences with the barbed wire or the razor wire on the top, and I jump over the little fences, and we then we get to B. But Sean gets there, he's all torn up, and I'm still looking fresh like a daisy.
If you want to believe that, I'll allow you to have that fantasy. I will actually. I guess I'll say I will not say anything to undermine that fantasy. All right, and you just mentioned something that's really important here, which is the planning dimension of team versus individual. We're approaching this in a way that should be agnostic, meaning you could do this with a team or you could do this as an individual. Um, if you're doing this as a team, from my perspective, you need to have an ultimate decision maker, and that person is the one who decides what B is at the end of the day. Now there can be different channels, like different areas of responsibility for team participants, their role in getting from A to B, and there can be a larger vision of like what you're trying to achieve as a team. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you are a business owner, you have 4 people who are contributing in various capacities to go from A to B. That's still there's buy-in, there's agreement. Everybody understands where A is, and everybody understands crystal clear where B is. The only added complexity is that each person needs to understand his or her role in the A to B progression, which is just another layer of complexity, but it's the same process. The team should arrive at B, not individuals showing up there weeks apart. All right, so let's talk about we'll talk about B, and then we'll introduce a couple of ideas that we haven't put on the list here that we'll I think they're important. One's sort of a framework to think about, and the other is just a term to be aware of. Which we'll see where they show up, if they show up.
Yeah. And we also need to mention the elephant in the room, which and it's in the third word of our name for this course. And so at some point, I don't know if we should mention it now, what we're optimizing for, but the essence of this entire thing is acknowledging that business and the way that we look at marketing is through this lens of it being a system, and a system has a the entire system is optimized for one thing. And so all these little pieces that we're doing, they're all subordinate to this larger thing or this function that we're optimizing towards. And so at some point we need to just unpack that a bit, because it informs everything else.
Yeah, and that was one of the 2 things. So that's this idea of throughput. So let's, how do we want to do this? I think I know where we can put that, and then I think we'll put it there, and then we'll riff on it and see where it goes. I think I know where it belongs. I have no idea where it's going to go after that, though. It may just weave in now that I'm thinking about it. So what you'll see here in the drawing is the red around these 3 critical questions, because what we want to know is the delta. What's changed, right, between current reality and desired future state? What has changed around the dimensions that matter? What has changed with our audience or audiences? What has changed with our offer or offers? And what's different about the economics of that? That's a really good place to start. And this happens really across 2 dimensions. If you think about it, one is more versus better, and it doesn't have to be either or. So more could be, let's say, I think this is an example you used earlier. It could be an increase in number of quality prospects on an email list. So we could say, okay, right now, let's just say for the sake of argument that you have done an initial offer you built an audience of 1,000 people over months. Once you reached that threshold of 1,000 people you've built this relationship with, you made an offer for an individual, essentially a live version of something that you want to turn into a course. You did, and you created that offer and you sold it to 20 people, and then you delivered on that. And now you have stepped back and said, okay, my current reality is I have 1,000 people on an email list. Of those 1,000, 20 became customers. So I have 20 customers. I've delivered this course. I now have an 8-module course that I created. And what I would like to do now is offer that live again. But I would this time, and let's just say for the sake of argument, say that you also have a waiting list with 50 names, but you want to get, I don't know, we'll say you instead of having 20 people for the second time you offer it, you want to expand that to 100. And you've done the math in your head, and it comes down to that you think if you add another 1,000 high quality prospects to your email list combined with your waiting list and other things, that you think that could get you to 100 people. And then you think to yourself, I think if I do that at this pace, I can, based on all these factors, I think I can do that in 90 days. So now you can see how the process is starting to work. Right? You're looking at forward at 90 days. It's informed by data. Like, this is where I am. I've done these things. I've got these results. This is my current reality. But this is what I would like to be different along those same dimensions. Instead of having 1,000 leads and 20 customers and 50 people on a waiting list, I would like to have 2,000 prospects on an email list who I'm engaging with. And I would like to have 120 customers total, the first 20 and 100 more. And the economics, maybe the first time you offered it, it was $497. And the second time you offer it, you realize, now that you got feedback and it was excellent and on, now you're going to offer it for $997. So now the economics, 100 people, $997 minus your fees to deliver, you're somewhere in the neighborhood of $95,000. Okay, like, you do all of that, like, but you can. What I'm hoping you're hearing in this is the precision and the clarity, not of how you're going to do it, but of what the future reality. And this is such a critical distinction. Do not get wrapped up in how. How is part of the planning process. How takes care of itself later. How is you're working back from the crystal clear vision of the future. If you start asking yourself how you're going to do it while you're thinking about what you're going to do, it short circuits everything, because then you say, well, I've never done that before. Who cares, right? That doesn't matter. All that matters is where you are and where you want to go. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean being, I don't want to say stupid. I do want to say stupid. It doesn't mean being ridiculous. Where you say, oh, I did, I have 1,000 people and I have 20 customers. 90 days from now, I want 10,000. And this sounds ridiculous, but I've heard the equivalent of this more times than I can count, where it's like, okay, I've got 1,000 prospects, 20 customers, 50 people on a wait list. 90 days from now, I want 1,500 customers. And you're like, great. And why not ask for a unicorn too? Because it's probably more likely you'll get the unicorn. So it's not, we're not suggesting don't be too realistic, but we're also not suggesting that this is not, no offense to anybody, this is not woo-woo, the secret vision board stuff where just because you put it out in the universe is going to deliver. Maybe, I have no evidence to the contrary, but experience suggests that there's a sweet spot in between those two where there's something between where you are and that the enormous vision that you have for the future. There's something that can happen to get you closer to that in the next 90 days that is both reasonable and a stretch, and it's somewhere in that neighborhood that feels like maybe it's a little outside the possibility range, but not so far that it's impossible. It's exciting, but it's not doesn't feel impossible. It just feels like, wow, that's going to be a challenge. Like, that's what we're looking for. But it's what you want to be able to describe. And I'm going to mention this, and I'm going to then I think what we'll do is I'll wrap this up, hand it over to you for comments on this stuff, and then introduce the system stuff and throughput and the other metaphor. So what I really wanted to have people listening to this, watching this, focused on is, can you describe the desired future state, the change, and the same things that you described with precision in your current reality? So when you describe with precision the details of your current audience, if any, your current offers, if any, and the economics of that, when you imagine a point in time in the future, can you describe the change in those dimensions with the same level of precision? So it's not, I'll have more customers in 90 days. Is that one more customer, 2 more customers, or is it 100 more customers? Like, it's precision. It's precision between A to B. And it's that precision and that clarity. The Heath brothers in their book Switch called this a destination postcard. Right? You need to be able to see the postcard in your mind. Where are you going with precision? And you can say to yourself, I'm going to a place where instead of 1,000 prospects, I have 2,000 on my list. Where instead of 20 customers, I have 120 customers. Like that's where I'm going. Instead of having put $8,000 in the bank, I'm going to put $95,000 in the bank. Like that's what you want with this precision, because that's what starts to pull your attention forward. All right. Anything to add to this before we jump into throughput and system stuff and really get excited?
Yeah. There's no one way or right way to identify and prioritize opportunities. So I just wanted to like unpack better, for example. So Sean's done the more example. Better in this case could be versions of your 1,000 prospects. Maybe in Sean's example, you generated 20 customers, and then later you try to generate 100 customers extra or more. Well, maybe you only generate 2 customers, or maybe those 20 customers was way less than you thought you should have done, right? So there's this weird delta that didn't happen. So better in that case could be you identifying that actually my traffic source seems fine. I think that part's okay. And it's then prioritizing on maybe your assets on your website, your offer, for example, or your what you're doing to take a prospect and warm them up through a process that when they come onto your email list and then there's a few emails, by the time that offer's put in front of them, they way more receptive to this offer. So better in that case could be doing things on your website and in your email, and do it in such a way that you now can maybe generate 50 customers in that first cohort, as opposed to the 20. So that's the better component. So again, there's no right or wrong way. Ultimately, you need more and you need better, and you're gonna shift between your focus between these two things all the time, because you always want to try and get you're always trying to get better customers. You're always trying to make better prospects, and that's the better part. But then you also need the more, because if you're not increasing your lead flow, your business is never going to go anywhere, right? So it's just this cycle between more and better over and over again as you prioritize different opportunities in your business. And as the business gets bigger, there's going to be so much more opportunities to try and focus on. We'll scroll down on a little image just now, and you'll see what this thing looks like when you really zoom out to the 10,000 foot view and looking down at your business, and you can then you're looking at all these opportunities. So yeah, I just wanted to add that extra piece.
Yeah, and I think this is probably an area where I think we probably disagree in this area a little bit, which is fun. I think there's this misconception. Anyone who's been on a Q&A call knows this isn't true, but there's probably a misconception because people see our polished final work where we've worked through the stuff that you and I just always agree on everything, but we don't. And that's part of the dynamic of our relationship. We just see things. We have we both have similar length experiences, different enough that we pick up different aspects. So it's fun for our audience to get to see both the things that we see together, where we have like full congruence, and then where we start to emerge. And I think or diverge, sorry. My head's thinking about systems theory when I said emergent there. I think where I would caution on the better side is don't let better be an excuse for fuzzy. And to be clear, you didn't say this. I heard it, which is, it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. Me hearing something you were saying does not necessarily mean you said it. As we see when we send out emails and we get these 10-page replies that seem to have nothing to do with what we said in the emails that we sent. But the part I would caution on is when you if you make better goals, that what better is has the same level of precision as more. More is objectively easier, just because, you know, as a good friend of mine says once in a while, once in a while someone will say like, hey, last year we did 100,000 and this year we did 700,000. And he loves to blurt out, hey, that's more, right? Like, to state the obvious. So more is easy. More is easy to see, which means it's easier to be precise about. When you do better, when you have a better goal, be cautious, or be committed to precision in better. And I don't think one is any worse than the other. More versus better goals. Just understand exactly what it means, because there are qualitative things that are hard to pin down. Like, you might have, here's a good example of what I would consider a better goal versus more, although it's better expressed as more, or as less actually, which is, if you've ever had the experience, as we've recently had, of a long promotion with a lot of prep, then you can. It's a lot of work, lots of weekends, lots of late nights, very demanding tempo, and some people, that's how they do business all the time. They have to be putting in 16-hour days, 6 and 7 days a week, open ended. So if you could very easily have a current reality where, and it's not, we don't have this dimension on here, but we could certainly add a fourth dimension, which is experience. What is your personal experience of your business? And does that need to be the thing that changes? Do you need, if you've been going too slow, do you need to do more? If you've been going too fast, do you need to slow down? So you could very easily say, my current reality is I have this offer, I have this audience, the economics do X, Y, Z, but my experience of the business is whatever it is. You could say, you can express it qualitatively. I feel burned out, like I'm working too much. But then you get into put some numbers on that. I'm working 3 to 5 nights a week, past 10 p.m. The last X number of weekends, I have worked 1 or more days. Like, just get that precision and say, 6 weeks from now, I'm not going to do much to the offer. I'm not going to do much to the audience. The economics I assume will be kind of the same, but I want to have those 3 things be true. But I want to have 1 full weekend off, 1 full weekend day off every week, 1 full weekend off every month. And I don't want to work past 5 p.m. more than 1 night a week. Like, to me, like, that just gets mixing things in. That's better. It's a qualitative experience, but it still has a more component. Does that make sense? You see where I'm going with that? I think we're mixing up examples here, but I hope that, I don't know if that makes sense at all.
I think there's certainly different ways you can look at this idea of more and better, and I think they're not meant to be one thing. It's, better and more are both subjective, and I've focused a lot of energy on better over the years. I focused on better more than I focused on more over the years. And again, better for me is different to Sean's, definition of better, perhaps. And, just one way to look at better is you create amazing assets on your websites that, although there's a lot of time and energy and resources that have gone into create this thing, once you've created it, it's created. It's an asset that's going to work for you. It's like an Archimedes lever. It is now just so much better that it's going to make more better. It's going to make more better because better makes everything better. So now, as you increase all the dials on the far left, so on your audience piece, and if you've got traffic components pointing in, so you've got traffic engines all coming or pointing in here, and because you've done the work to make this your website component better, or your front end better, more becomes just way better. It can be a proper step up, as opposed to just trying to work on more all the time and just ignore better, because then more can never become. It just won't scale in the same way, because as soon as you turn off all those traffic engines, you've still got like a really bad front end that's not that great, for example. And where it's better in those cases, it's always going to be better. Well, not always, but you can go to the Wayback Machine or archive.org, and you can look at pretty much any or most websites, and you can go back 1 year, go back 5 years, go back 10 years, and you can see what it used to be and what it looks like now. And in many cases, it's just so much better. But that better took years, right? It took years and years. But now their current reality is this thing that's just so much better. So funneling in more at that point, the whole thing is just going to work better. So again, more and better for me is a thing that they need to work together, and one is a huge lever for the other. Yeah, I think that's any extra thing I'll add.
All right, so that's a good segue into system. We don't want to get into systems theory in detail yet. We're going to talk about that in a moment, just sort of at a high level, just to make it sort of approachable. But what is really important to understand in the context of where you are versus where you're going is a concept from systems theory, which is the term is throughput, and throughput is the rate at which a system produces the system goal. And that sounds like a mouthful. You're like, well, wait a second, now I've got like a million things. Like, wait, there's a system and it has a goal, and then there's the rate. Okay, it sounds infinitely confusing, but it's actually what makes it so magical and so useful is that throughput is the single measure by which we evaluate progress. And throughput, it needs to be the most meaningful. It needs to be the way that you know you're improving. It needs to be the single metric that matters, that all decision making is subordinated to. Our measure of throughput is happy customers. It's not customers, because and the distinction is very important. And actually, Andre and I have very different definitions. We have very similar definitions, but then very different approaches to how we implement those and think about those definitions. And I think it'll be interesting if we both go down that road in a second, or not. Maybe I'm teeing up something that's not going to be interesting at all. But from the meaningful distinction for us is we're not in the customer at any cost business or the customer at all costs business. We are in the happy customer business, and happy customers is there are objective components to it where I tend to put more focus, and there are subjective components where I think I put less focus on that relative to Andre putting the focus there, but maybe not. We'll both sort of talk through this in a second. But what's important about that distinction is because the single most important metric in our business is happy customers, it informs lots of decision making that would be different if the metric were just customers. So here's an example that probably everybody who's listening to this has experienced. If you've ever been in any of our enrollments and our promotions in the last couple of years, you'll see that we send on the final day, we send an email, one email. You never get from us a countdown, 4 hours to go, 1 hour to go, last call. You never see us do the link, we got some feedback that the link was broken, so we're opening up enrollment for another 24 hours. We never do any of that. And if we did do that, we would generate more customers. Absolutely, categorically, no doubt in my mind, we would generate more customers doing that. But more customers, we're not optimizing for that. We're optimizing for happy customers. And we've made the decision that all of those things to get just more customers aren't actually in service to generating happy customers. So we just don't do it. The throughput for us is it's different, which means it's that happy customer, the customer who objectively doesn't refund, because you can't be a customer at all, never mind a happy customer if you don't no longer a customer. There are people who are consuming the content. There are people who are engaged. There are people getting value from it. There are people who they send us emails, they're communicative with us, they become fans and super fans, and happy customer is a big spectrum. There's a lot there, but the initial objective way to determine, it's sort of a exclusionary thing, is after 60 days, how many people remain, right? That's the first thing to look at. So if you, and that's refund rate, because if, let's just say for the sake of argument, that you get your business going and you build the perfect mousetrap and you're really good at selling, you're really good at generating excitement, and you get 100 people every month who excuse me, become customers, but 60 days later only 80 of that 100 remain, your refund rate is 20%. So now, where I think Andre and I get a little bit different is, do we still consider those 80 happy customers? I consider at least that they have to be there to be a happy customer. The 20 who left are clearly unhappy customers. They're not customers anymore. But it's the 80 that matters. It's recognizing that it's not the number of people who buy, it's the number of people who stay. That's critically important, because if you're optimizing, because you can optimize for the buyer at the expense of the person who stays. And it's very counterproductive when we do that. So we use this single metric. We encourage others to borrow it. I don't think we invented it. Maybe you invented it. I don't know, but we're not protective of it. But this idea that the single most important metric in your business is the happy customer, and making decisions from that perspective. Is this likely to generate a happy customer versus just generate a customer versus not do anything at all? Like that single metric then it becomes the thing against which you measure every initiative. More and better, doesn't matter, because is it driving that number? Is it making the whole reason the business is the business, the whole reason the system is the system, is to create happy customers? And if you're doing something that is not making customers happier or more customers happier, why are you doing it? That's the question, which is going to lead us to the next part. But I want to hand it over to you for a while to riff on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to go wrong here when you don't understand this higher order definition of the system is there's a single goal that the system itself is being optimized for, and then you can zoom in to the parts that essentially create the business. And I'm sure everyone's heard of these ideas that it's taken from economics and then applied to business. Whereas if you just increase your clicks on your ads by 10%, and then just increase your clicks on your website from page 1 to page 2 by 10%, and just increase your opt-ins by 10, and it's increasing all these things. And then don't worry, because now you're going to have this business that produces exponential growth. And that's the biggest lie in the world. That idea that idea borrowed from economics cannot be applied to business, because business isn't sales on a spreadsheet. It doesn't compound in the same way. And when you're optimizing in that way, trying to optimize all the little parts for the highest throughput, like each part you want to optimize for the highest throughput, it undermines the objective of the entire system. So the system itself gets worse, because you're trying to make and force all the little parts in between to be optimized to the max. It's so easy to get more clicks on an ad by making big claims, and get more people to opt in by sticking in a huge big bribe, and then doing all these things, increasing, like really ramp up and ratchet up the sales pressure by adding urgency and doing all these things. But that does not contribute to to the end goal. I mean, I've seen many. I've had the opportunity of looking inside of businesses that are in doing these huge big product launches, and it is not uncommon that there's a between a 20 and a 50% refund rate on some of these big launches. I mean, 50% a few years ago was just, you know, par for the course because of all these different things that needed to happen along the way. So what we're saying is that when you understand and realize that you optimizing for happy customers, if you create your definition of what a happy customer means, and then you work backwards from that, and then at each little point, so on your opt-in page, on your ads, you keep thinking back, is this going to contribute to the goal of the system? And if it's no, well, then you don't do that. So you know, one of the insights of systems theory is by increasing all these little parts along the way, increasing the throughput of each little thing, it almost will always undermine the system goal. So just having that at the back of your mind and just asking yourself that question at every point, is this going to increase or decrease that system goal whenever you're doing anything? Yeah, and I suppose we can introduce a theory of constraints here, but I don't want to get overly complicated and then everyone glazes.
Everyone go hide. Yeah, and it really comes down, it's a filter. And this is a perfect segue into the next, I guess it's a metaphor is a way to think about it. But we've mentioned this many times, it's a book, the title says everything. The book is good. But the title kind of says it all. And the title of the book is called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? It's by Ben Hunt Davis. He was in the British Men's 8 who won. That's the British Men's 8 rowing team. After, I don't know, 96 years or so, they hadn't won gold at the Olympics. They had a disastrous, or they had a subpar performance in Germany in the World Games. They got together as a team and made the decision that they wanted to win gold in Sydney, in the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and they did. And the way they did is they subordinated every decision they made to a single question. Will it make the boat go faster? And if the answer was no, they didn't do it. And that's, to me, is the best definition, the best metaphor and description of the idea of system throughput. It's the best one I've ever heard, because if you're going to do something, let's say you sit down and you've gone through this process to reorient us to the A to B, or you sat down and you say, okay, here's my current reality, and here's what I want to do. 6 weeks from now, this is what I want to have accomplished for these reasons. Okay, will it make the boat go faster? Right? Will the things that you've decided to do increase the throughput of your system? The single number that matters more than anything else, will that number change in any way whatsoever? If the answer is no, why are you doing it? Now, the first thought someone might have is well, it's not just about making more money, or it's not that doesn't have to be the definition of the boat going faster. Right? That doesn't your definition of throughput. Like for Andre and I, we have a Venn diagram that we use. The Venn diagram, the sort of three components are: is the business creating value for us? Like, is it, you know, making money? Is it producing value for us? Are we creating? That's one circle. Are we creating value for others that we feel good about? And then that's a second circle. And the third circle is our experience of the work positive for each of us as individuals? Do we like what we're doing? And where those three overlap, where we're making money, we enjoy what we're doing, we're creating value for an audience, that is the sweet spot. That is our boat going fast. That's throughput for us. The objective measure for the business that tells us we're doing that is our happy customers, not just the customer, because we could make more money if we only focused on one of those circles at the expense of the others. You say, well, our experience of the business doesn't really matter. Whether or not we're really doing a lot for our audience doesn't really matter. We just want to jam, put $1 million in our hand in the next couple of months. but that's not what a Venn diagram is supposed to communicate. The Venn diagram is supposed to show you that perfect point at which the things that matter intersect. And that is the boat going faster. Right? That's what it means. So if we were to sit down, for example, and say, okay, our current reality is this, and we in the future, we want to, 6 weeks from now, we want to be working a lot less. And we look at our Venn diagram and it doesn't, and experience isn't in there anywhere. It doesn't matter. Then it's not making the boat go faster. Right? It's not, we haven't really made an improvement. And this idea of will it make the boat go faster is just a sentence to repeat to yourself, to check in and ask yourself all the time, are the things that I'm doing, can I connect them to the things that matter? That's what this question is all about. Because what I've certainly seen in my experience working with clients is the number of decisions that get made that have no relationship to anything improving whatsoever, or the system improving, doing what it's supposed to do better. I'm still shocked by the number of conversations I've been in where someone could not explain to me how all of the time and the energy and the dollars they were thinking about allocating to an initiative had any relationship to making that system better or making the boat go faster. And it was almost like there were many times when it was almost like no one had ever even considered that. And that is the most important question to ask ourselves over and over and over. Why am I going to do this thing? I'm looking out into the future and I want this to be true. I want to be drawn to it. I want this to be my new reality. How does that relate to what it is that I'm actually trying to do here? What is meaningful to me in what I'm doing? How does it relate? And if the answer is I don't know, why the hell would I ever think about doing it? Because it's not, for everything we do, there's an opportunity cost. An opportunity cost means it's not just the things that you do that matter. It's the things that you do.
I think I've lost you. Are you still there?
I'm still here. You hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. You just disappeared for us.
Yeah, the power just flashed. So it's always entertaining when we're in the middle of something. All right. So I'll let you riff on that while
Yeah. So I think the only thing I'll add to that is I'll highlight boat in that sentence, because everyone's boat is going to be defined differently. And this metaphor may sound obvious, but it's something that I think of all the time in the context of will it make the boat go faster? And if you're in the Formula One business, boat is the Formula One car. Sean has a tractor, and he uses his tractor on his huge plot of land to do tractor stuff. I don't know if he plows, but he certainly scoops snow with it and moves logs. Well, sticking slick tires onto his tractor isn't going to make the tractor go faster, in that context. And if your definition of boat is you're into touring cars or you're going long distances, well, building a Formula One car isn't going to get you there any faster. The car's going to blow up along the way. So I know that sounds a bit obvious and a bit weird, but we all create metaphors that resonate with us, but with each of us. But that's one of the things I find helpful, is just define what boat is. And it's not a Formula One car unless you're in the Formula One car business. And yeah, so are you back yet, Sean?
Yeah, I'm here. And it's what you just said is really critically important to think about too when you're mixing parts. This is why we can't be in the parts business, because you can't have. I think I don't know where we mentioned, maybe it was in the traffic engine or someplace, but when we talked about systems theory, I mean, you don't want to have parts from one type of a system bolted on the parts of another, because it's the central insight of systems theory is that it's how the parts relate to each other. It's the relationships that drive the action, not the parts themselves. And that's such a critical insight. So it's not, it's not the ad that somebody clicks on that's as important as the ad that somebody clicks on relative to what they see next, relative to what their experience is days later. Like, it's those relationships that matter. So if you have, and we see this happen all the time, where somebody has like a Franken business, right? Where you've got the, super curiosity, clickbaity ad, and then it leads to um, a landing page that has lots of good content, and it's like, well, wait, like, what's just happened? Like, what's going on here? Or then you might get the super clickbaity ad, and then the super short content with all the you're going to get all these things, these freebies, and then they get the freebies, and then there's a 10-part email series to get them to a $2,000 offer. It's like, in what world did any of that in total make sense? Like, what led somebody to believe that if you could just get somebody to click on a goofy Google Display Network clickbaity ad with a bold head, promise of curiosity, that somehow 10 days later they'd hand over a couple of $1,000s? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But you see it all the time, um, and when you start optimizing for those parts, and this is what you were talking about earlier, that's so profoundly important, is you can make any of the parts like increase exponentially, but then the whole system gets worse. You could add, the classic example is you could add a tremendous amount of traffic of ultra low quality and actually make your sales worse. It's profound how many mistakes can be made by trying to focus on just a part.
Yeah, totally. Alrighty. So,
all right, so let's move on to the big drawing here. But before we do that, let's wrap up the A to B thing with the two questions that are going to segue into the really where everybody listening to this is going to spend 99.99999% of your time engaging with the system outside of the community itself, which is once you've gone through this process, and to be clear, this planning process, if you want to think about it this way, this visioning process, if that lights you up more, whatever it is, this understanding current reality relative to a desired future state, that process is something that you're going to do over and over and over again for the rest of your life, certainly the rest of your professional life. And it's something you're going to get so much better at. You're going to know yourself in the process much better. You're going to understand the dynamics of the process, what you can accomplish better. Like, all of those things are going to change, and that's just part of it. So if you do the first time you do this, if you feel like you just no idea what you're doing, you get 6 weeks later, nothing seemed to, who cares? Right? That's just you. The only way to get better at this is to practice it, and you're not going to be great at it. Nobody is. So just do it. Get out there, do it, make your best attempt about precision and clarity. But what you're going to find, I think, is once you have done this work, you know where you are, you know where you want to go. Both of those are precise, and they're around these dimensions of audience and offer and economics and your experience of the business. You understand kind of what your boat is, like how, like what matters to you, what's your business, what does faster mean, what's the metric you're using for throughput. You're really going to have to answer two questions, because now you know you're going to know what needs to be done, right? To get from A to B, you're going to know, okay, I have X, I want Y between here and there. It's going to come down to two essential questions. The first one is, do I know what to do? To get from where I am to where I'm going, do I know what to do? And second, do I know how to do it? I don't think there are any other questions, right? You know where you want to go. And then the first question is, all right, well, how do I do that? How do I go from 1,000 prospects to 2,000 prospects in 90 days? And that's a what do I do question. And then the question becomes, how do I do that? Right? And now I think we can segue down and show the broad overview of the system, so that we can orient everyone to this really how to think about where to find those answers, the what to do questions, and then within the how to do it takes care of itself. Once you find out what to do, within the what to do is we explain how to do it. So yikes, this is a terrifying image. I think what I'll do is I'm going to hit one part of this, and then I'm going to hand over the rest of it to you to do the high level overview, so I can take a break from hearing my self talk. So the part that I'll focus on is the awareness, engagement, and conversion diagram at the top. This for me was this was one of the most profound insights of understanding I had about systems theory. And Andre and I have been students of systems theory for a very long time. It's something that intellectually it influences my work greatly, my life greatly. I think about it a lot. But then I saw this it's called a Knizia illusion. And once I saw that, I was like, that I finally understood conceptually something that was elusive to me. So the Knizia illusion that you'll see, it looks like there's a triangle that is labeled your business. But the reality is that triangle doesn't, there was at no point did we draw a triangle. The triangle is an emergent property of the three gray shapes, the little Pac-Man shapes, right? So the idea here is that what we think of as our business isn't actually a thing. There isn't something that is our business that we can put in a box and we can take it to places and say, look, here's my business. What we have instead we have activities through which we build awareness of our business, our offer, or us, or whatever it is. We have activities where we engage with audiences, where they take steps closer to us and we're building relationships with them. And then we have activities where the awareness and the engagement are interacting in ways where that people become paying customers. Money is changing hands. And what we think of as our business, that triangle in the center, emerges from the way in which we do those things. Those things are not something we do because of our business. Those are things that we do that actually create our business. And if we change any of those things, the whole business changes. That's the second component of this thing. If we said, okay, in the past for awareness, we did what we got. All of the awareness for our business came from organic search traffic on Google, and people were actively interested, and they're looking for us. And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, an algorithm change or something that goes away, and now we're paying for traffic, or we have affiliates, or whatever. Like the nature of the business changes. Because awareness changed, the entire business is now different, and we may have to adapt the rest of the business to meet the change in the part of it, because the relationships of all the parts are what matter. And the way we've drawn this is very elegant, but you can imagine some Franken shapes in there where it doesn't create an elegant looking business, because the way you do one thing influences all the others and it looks really weird. So I love this Knizia illusion. I love what it communicates. This to me is the first time I felt like I really understood this idea of the emergence of the business from elements of the business, the relationship of those elements. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you now if you wanted to do the sort of high level, walk people through all the components of your drawing here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where to start. So this will map to pretty much any business, certainly any business. I can't think of any business that it maybe can't map to. So, every business needs to create awareness in some way. It doesn't need to be paid traffic. It can be, you can create paid traffic components. It can be, you can use social media and organic and referral and just keep adding them over here. And then there's stuff that happens. You have a front end, and most businesses, at least every business, according to Sean and I, should build an email list. Doesn't matter if it's an e-com business or an expertise business. You should be building an email list. So this broadly maps to every business. We've highlighted pieces over here because once you've identified, do I know what to do, and then how do I do it? Well, this is just pointing you in directions of where you can focus attention. Once you've identified, opportunities that you're going to use to go from A to B, whatever you've defined for B now, it's going to inform where you focus your energy over here. If you've got 0, well, the durable business starts you at nothing, and over time you will build an expression that looks similar to this diagram over time. So as you're looping from A to B, A to B, A to B, over time you will create an expression of this. Most people's businesses that already exist, an expression of this already, it's there already. So now identifying opportunities, again, whatever you've defined as your B, this is going to point you in the direction. Or do you want to focus on increasing your traffic engines? Well, then you would, inside of the Learning Academy, you would go into you double click on that one. If it's your front end over here, you've identified that you feel you need to create better prospects, and any element on your front end, well, then sphere of influence would be the place that you would double click and then go in. And then again, if your opportunity that you've identified, maybe you've got a big business, maybe you're doing multiple million a year. Well, at that point, there's so many points of leverage that you can zoom in on. But maybe it is email marketing, so you would then double click on art of email, and then within that course, you would then again try and identify opportunities where you're going to start your move from A to B. It might just be a single sequence. So within art of email, it might be you're going to create a customer onboarding sequence on the back end of one of your products. So you would double click on that section inside of art of email, and that's what you would build out in your sprint to get to B. Maybe it's your relationship building series because you found that you haven't actually got one. Well, then you double click on art of email and you go to the RBS section, and that would be the how. It would lay out how you're going to do that, and then it's just a matter of you executing on that to get to B. And at some point, B is now going to become your A. And then at that point, you'll then zoom back out again. Okay, so where's the next opportunity that you want to focus on? So you'll double click on different parts in this map and zoom in and zoom out. And over time, as you loop between A and B, A and B, A and B forever, essentially forever, this is the map that allows you to do that. And this will broadly fit into every business. One last thing I'll mention here, we have a section inside of art of email that talks about this concept of world building. We're eventually going to break that out and put that into a separate component inside of the system. So then it can be a system that refers to everything. It's currently inside of art of email, but world building is something that affects everything. It's the world that you create for people to come in and inhabit. So they come in through traffic sources, through any traffic source. They enter your world. You have mechanisms that pull them forward or repel them out. They end up on your email list. And I think the last thing I'll mention here is to draw your attention to this Pac-Man thing here, whereas your business is an expression, is a emergent quality of these three components. Now, awareness can start here. Engagement, you could think of it being in the middle here, and then conversion happens here. But this is a meta idea that you can apply into everything. So just inside of this email marketing component of your business, so inside of your email list, this thing exists over there as well. You have an offer, whether it's an affiliate promotion or a new course that you're going to create. So you send out a bridge email to get awareness. So you want to You want people to become aware of this thing that you're about to do. You then engage with them over a number of emails, and at some point, conversions will happen. So that there exists only inside of here, but you can zoom out and you can see that expression exists across the entire business. And then you can zoom back in again, and that expression exists just inside of here. And then you can zoom out again, and then you can zoom into a single little ad, and a single little ad will have these three components all playing out. And I think that's what makes this quite elegant. And once you get your head around it, it's quite beautiful in the way that you can just zoom in and zoom out and just focus on different opportunities. But at no point do you ever lose this expression of what you need to do, and you know, it all contributes to this thing called your business. So I think that's my overview. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I think the first thing anybody who looks at the system who hasn't, already had a lot of exposure to the individual parts of it, like all of the parts, the first thing to deal with is it's overwhelming. Because in reality, each of those courses was designed at a minimum to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 weeks, at least, to do a pass through them, an initial pass, and we joke around a lot. 5 out of 4 people are bad at math, and we're one of them. But we can do the math of how much there is there just to make a single pass through everything. We did a sprint through the art of email in 5 weeks with a group of people for a live workshop, and that felt like a sprint. The momentum builder workshop we did as a sprint very much as well. So to figure out where to start is, we recognize it's a challenge. It's a byproduct of wanting to have something that covers everything. In order to do that, there just has to be a lot there. So to figure out where to go to answer this question, now that I know what I want to be true in the future, what do I do? This is a broad map, and it's not. This is one thing that Knizia Illusion does not communicate. I wish it did, and it's something that we've talked about. In the traffic engine, there's a section they're called missing chapters. One of them talks about this specifically, this idea that none of these activities exists in isolation. So awareness and engagement and conversion, there are probably some examples where somebody click on it, they click on an ad, they buy a thing. But that's not generally how the world works. But the awareness and engagement and conversion are great labels, conceptual labels for broad categories. But a lot of the things that happen in your business, the edges in those are very blurry. Like the thing that makes somebody aware of you may, by definition, pique their curiosity to get engagement. Those two things may happen simultaneously and that's ultimately what makes the system so powerful. Is that, and this is an idea that I hope we really get you to understand it today, that we haven't mentioned yet, which is because the system is based on a set of shared underlying principles, and those principles are on a foundation of similar values. So the whole it's an entire system where the parts are designed to be part of a larger whole, which sounds just sort of intellectual, but the net impact of that, which is so critical for everyone listening to this and so critical over time to understand, is that when all of the parts are designed to work together, when you introduce one of them into the system, following into your business, following the ideas that we teach, the whole system improves because they're designed to work together systemically. So the way that you learn to drive traffic over which you have control, paid traffic in the traffic engine, the way that you learn to do that has a profound impact on engagement and conversion later. They're designed so that when they're put together, that you get a 1 + 1 + 1 is greater than 3 phenomenon, which is very different than going and buying a course on driving traffic that may not have any relationship to the way that you're going to convert an audience to paying customers later. And that disconnect means that you could create 50 traffic campaigns that might not improve your business at all. But because of the way that what we teach works together systemically, when you're doing something anywhere in the business, the impact is to make your whole business better. That's the idea. And that points to something that's important to think about in your A to B planning, is that you're probably not going to go wrong. Right? So you're not, if you think, okay, do I know what to do? I think it's this. And then you jump in and you do that. You know what? That wasn't actually what I should have been doing there to get where I wanted to go. You haven't made a mistake. You've still likely improved your business. Maybe not exactly around the dimensions that you've intended, but that you haven't gone down a road that you shouldn't have, because every part of this is designed to work together to improve the whole. And that's such a hard concept to grasp, but it's such a powerful concept. So I think where we can wrap up today, we're coming up on an hour and 44 minutes. Wow. I think maybe both of us could talk about how we would do it. Meaning, how would we? That'll be a fun one to end on, because I think we probably would we would probably approach this differently, to go from an A to a B with a time frame and what we would focus on. And then, because we both know all of the content backwards and forwards, we would know how to go find it. So maybe just let's take like 5 minutes each or 3 minutes each or something, and I'll have you go first, because then I can have some time to prepare. Sorry. But let's talk about, like, how would we go through the A and the B, and then how would we figure out what to do and go find it in the system? I think that would be interesting for people to see. But then let's take off the table that we would be going from zero to something, because if you're someone listening to this, we've mentioned this already, if you're listening to this and you're starting at zero, or starting at really anything under $25,000 in revenue or something like that, just go do the durable business. Like, that's the place to start, because it's and if you're creating an offer, a brand new offer, go to the durable business. It has the audience and offer masterclass sort of embedded in it. Go look at the beginning of that to work on an offer. So that had a lot of people listening. That's the place to start. So let's just take that off the table. But how would you? I would be curious, I guess, Andre, from your perspective, how would you think about your time frame? Maybe we don't have to like actually specify anything, but how would you think about time frame? How would you think about assessing where you wanted to go within that time frame? And then how would you go from that to this map of all of the content that we've created and figure out what to do next? I'd be curious how you would approach that, and then that'll give me time to figure out how I would approach it.
Yeah, I've got no idea. Well, I think the first insight is that every single business is going to be an expression of how somebody wants to build that business. Our business. Well, let me say it a different way. Every business is a fingerprint that represents like someone's DNA. This thing that they want to build and how they want to show up in the world. And based on that, this map will look slightly different for everyone. And again, the other thing I'll say is, early on, outside of the, starting from zero, this can be very unsophisticated, very almost simple. You have a traffic source, you have some mechanism to get people onto an email list, and there's many businesses, even pretty fairly big businesses. There's many just on Substack, for example. Literally, the entire business lives on Substack, which is just people writing emails, producing high quality content, and there's a mechanism for prospects, so people that come to the centerpiece here, there's engagement that happens between the person writing the content and interacting with those people, and some of them are going to want to take the step forward and pay for more. So inside of the Substack ecosystem, for example, there's a mechanism for subscribers to pay. So that's a very simple business that still maps directly to this. And the opportunities for somebody running a Substack business is going to be quite different to a business like ours, for example, which still maps to the same map. It'll map to this thing in front of us, but there's more moving parts for our business. But then our business is a little thing compared to, digital marketer or Russell Brunson's behemoth of a business, and then there's going to be even more moving parts. And again, even though it'll map to those opportunities, it's going to require a huge big team and, certain things that certain people may not want. So again, the business is an expression of how you want to show up. So yeah, I'm not sure what else to add other than you just start off with this thing being a simple little thing, and then you just bolt on things as this thing expands, as you move between A and B, and every single time you move, you create, okay, this is my desired future state of what I want to build now. You're going to have learned something from the last loop from A to B. Maybe you're ambitious and you're going to create this huge big sequence or a PLS, and you realize from actually doing it that it took a lot more time than you thought. So you would reassess your time constraint through your next A to B loop, and you'll get better at judging the time required to build certain assets in order to move from A to B, and then from B to become A, and then for you to make your next leap through this structural tension over here, and always maintaining that structural tension. It's in our business, it's just Sean and I creating the content because that's what we want to do. We could certainly get other people to create some of the content, but this is what we love to do. So the fact that only Sean and I can create content for our entire business, no matter how big our business becomes, it is just the two of us creating the content, that's a constraint on the business, which is fine because we're aware of that constraint. So we just need to be more realistic between our A and B at that point. So we'll have to cycle through A and B many times to create certain opportunities for us that can move the business forward in a way that maybe adds, doubles the business. So doubling the business may take a few years as opposed to just 1 year, for example, because there's an inherent constraint in the business. Other businesses are different. It could be a business of one. So then that constraint is, it's, everything's done by a single person and maybe one person running a support desk. So that also determines what B can do, and then how fast you can loop through A and B. So yeah, I feel like I'm starting to ramble now. So I'll let you take this home.
You gave me time to prepare, so I appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many dimensions that we can answer this question across, right? So it's and it also depends on where people are in their experience of actually going through planning. For me, I know myself pretty well. I know, for example, that the time frame for me that seems to be best is close enough that it feels like it's pulling me, but far enough where there's a sweet spot, which for me is somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 weeks. So that would be where I would start. Also, another thing I know about myself that I mentioned earlier is that I have to. The audacious isn't the right word, but I have to set goals for myself, or I have to think about, if I want to accomplish something, if that's the mode that I'm in, is accomplishment, then it has to be big enough to excite me, but not so overwhelming that I'm like, I don't think I can do it. So I know, I know those two things about myself, but I know them because I've gone through this dozens and dozens and dozens of times. If somebody else listening to this may not know those two things, and if you don't, those are things to pay attention to. I mean, early on, it's this idea of know thyself. This is a perfect time to learn about yourself and pay attention to it. Does 4 weeks feel right? Sometimes for some people, a week is the right planning increment. You can kind of figure out where you want to be a week from now and make it happen. I mean, that may be right for you. Other people really orient well to a year. Like the year is just the annual goal. I mean, there isn't a right answer here, but there is a right answer for you, and it's worth finding it. That's a critical thing to keep in mind, that the value of this process is in what you get as a result, and also who you become as a result, like how you know yourself, how to know what you're able to accomplish, how to know what you like to accomplish. Like those are the things. So that's the starting point for me. So what I would do, when I assess my current reality, one thing about me that is probably people who listen to any of our calls pick up on very quickly is I find what I consider to be objective reality. It's very important to me, and precision is very important to me. So I would probably err on the side of a much finer degree of precision about whatever current reality is. So let me actually sit down and look at the data, verify that my understanding of the data to establish this view of objective reality is true. And whatever narrative I'm telling myself about that, I want to check that too, because I think we should find a quote about how the worst thing we can do is fool ourselves, and we're the easiest people to fool, right? So I've spent quite a lot of time trying to learn the various ways in which I predictably fool myself, and at least be aware that I might be doing it. So that finding the initial reality, or I'm sorry, that initial current reality, I would want to have some level of precision, and I would know that I would be creating in my mind a narrative associated with that, and I would want to ask myself some questions about that. Like, do I know this? Do I think this? Am I applying am I projecting myself onto this situation? Whatever it is, but I just want to be. I would err on the side of precision in current reality, and then for desired future state, I would set the bar a little higher and felt comfortable, so that it was motivating, and I would probably set that bar in somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 weeks. And I would ask myself questions around what do I want to be true 6 weeks from now across these various dimensions. And those dimensions would be, certainly audience, offer, economics, my experience of it. I would want to double check with myself. Is my focus in this moment, is it more outcome, like accomplishment, achievement stuff, or is it experience? Like which of those two dimensions am I? When I say two, I listed four, and I said two. The two dimensions really it's outcome versus experience. And outcome can be accomplishments, can be achievements, things like that. But then experience is like, what is my internal subjective experience of between now and then, and when I arrive there, like how has that changed? I would ask myself a lot of these questions to get a pretty rich understanding of where I want it to be, because where I want to be needs to pull me forward. And in order for it to pull me forward, it needs to be big enough that it captures my attention and my interest, close enough that I feel like I'm going to get there reasonably quickly, so I can do the next thing that's exciting, and clear. It needs to be crystal clear to me. What is it that I'm doing? Because I want to then ask that final set of questions for myself, which is, if this happens and I accomplish it, if I actually do this, if this becomes true, do I care? Is it meaningful? And that sounds like a ridiculous question. Like, well, of course it would be. At least 50% of the time that I go through this process, I realize that the thing that I'm focusing on in this process that I think matters isn't ultimately the thing that matters most. I mean, that's a very common byproduct. And it's a really good time to figure that out before you start taking action. To realize like, whoa, all right, everything that I said made sense, and how I got here, like, I can see it all, it makes sense. But if I actually get there, that doesn't feel like it's that meaningful. So let's go back. Let's figure out why, and then it's about, I might pressure test that a little bit. It's okay, what's going on here? I write every day. A lot of this stuff shows up in the writing, and it sort of helps point me in those directions. But at the end of that, whether it's hours or a day or whatever it is, I would want to have a very clear, and I love the thing I mentioned before from the Heath brothers from their book, Chip and Dan Heath from their book Switch. We'd like to have this idea of a destination postcard. It's just something that in my mind, I know where I'm going. I know that where I'm going it has these qualities. And so that I know when I get there, and it's exciting to me. Like, I want to go there. I'm like, that sounds great. If 6 weeks from now that's true, that's excellent. And it may only be that it's true and it's excellent because it's setting up the next thing, but that it's necessary to get there. That's fine. It doesn't have to be an end unto itself, but it does need to check those boxes. And at that point, that's when I then need to figure out, okay, now that I know where I am and where I'm going, do I actually know what to do to get there? And this is the hardest part. Certainly for me, it's been the hardest part to say, okay, when we're making this change, or we're going to do this thing, or I want to accomplish this thing, to hit this new level, where do I need to go? So I'll use a real example here, just because this is something that's on my radar. One of the things we did last November, Andre and I did, when these ideas for putting everything together in the system emerged, but when we were pressure testing that idea individually and together, I couldn't figure out the dimensions around which to make that decision. And we didn't, and for me, that's very important to understand, like, how do we make this decision to go from a individual course business to a single course business? And I wasn't figuring out ways to feel like my decision making was solid. So what I did instead, almost accidentally, is I thought, well, let's just forget about all of that. And if I just made a list of what a perfect business would include, what would the elements be? And I made the list, and it mapped really well to what we were talking about. Like, I could see that that list included, a customer generating front end offer, a core offer, continuity, a multi-level continuity. Like, it had these things, and then it made it so easy to understand how this decision we were making mapped to it. But part of that, in there, one of the things that's on my radar for probably in the next 90 days or so, is to co-create, but to co-create and be responsible for the development of a customer generating front end offer. That the idea being that's a lower cost offer that we can pay for traffic, and the amount we pay for traffic, the cost to acquire a customer, is somewhere approaching break even of what we make on the sale, the average order value. That's a break even customer acquiring front end. That's a big project, right? So let's assume that I've done the A to B. Let's assume that it's maybe mid-April, and I'm doing this exercise, and I know that what I need to do next. I know that we have a core offer. I know that we have continuity because we're releasing Lab at the end of March, and Lab Elite. So I know those things are true. The next thing that I'll be focusing on beginning around mid-April will be working with Andre to develop this front end offer, this customer acquiring front end offer. So knowing that, that's my B. The B is, let's say I want to give myself 6 weeks, and I want to have the actual offer so that we can then turn our attention to the traffic campaigns, et cetera. If that's the B point, A is where I am relative to that. It's the metric that I'm looking at is essentially offer an audience. So we don't have a my current reality in mid-April will be that we don't have this front end offer yet. We do have a core offer, and we do have continuity. Then our audience will have some info about that. And then when I make that future reality, when I sketch that out in detail, I'm going to want to have a complete front end customer acquiring offer, and I'll put some dimensions around that. At that point, I need to go, okay, well, how do I know what to do? How do I do that? And what I will do, and it's, this gets back to saying we teach what we do, so it makes it really great when we need to do things, because we can just go to the material we've created as refreshers, because that really embodies our best thinking about it. But at that stage, I'm going to essentially be what each of you. I'm a student of our own work. I'm going to go to the audience and offer masterclass, and I'm going to work through not so much the first part, because those decisions have already been made for us. Our business already exists. But the second part, using the value proposition design canvas, I'm going to do the exact same thing that we teach you to map out the dimensions of that front end offer before I actually start working on it. And I'm going to use the audience and offer masterclass to create the bones of that offer. Andre and I will co-create that together. Is when that's finished, so at the end of the 6 weeks or so, and that we have that offer, we've created the content, and I have to answer, what am I going to do next? I'm going to go into the traffic engine. Unfortunately, I wrote the traffic engine, so it's embodied knowledge myself, but I'm still going to essentially follow exactly what we teach in the traffic engine. I'm going to follow for that next 6 weeks to build out the first campaigns the way we teach them. So that's how I would orient to this. And then just over time, I'm always going to find those parts in the system that map to the things that I'm trying to accomplish, and the how will be in that material. So that's two perspectives on that. Anything? We're just past 2 hours. So anything you want to add to wrap up, or shall we call 2 hours successful today? 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah, actually, let me end off on a little sideline story that may map to this. So I built a racing simulator during the first part of COVID, while everyone was locked down, and it took me 6 months to build it, to get all the parts. And then I finally assembled this damn thing, and I've never been racing before. I've never raced on a track before, and I've got this thing. So obviously, the first thing I do is I jump into a really fast Porsche 911 RSR, and also an open seater, and I go tearing around various tracks, and I can barely stay on the track. It's just ridiculous. And in that moment, I realized how difficult this is, and so me thinking about, well, my current reality at that point was I know absolutely nothing about racing around a track. If the objective is to get around the track in the lowest possible speed, and initially I didn't really know what B was, because I was so new. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I went and did this live racing course with an ex-racing guy, and it was a group thing, and it was over like 6 weeks, and each week there was a different track. But one of the constants across the entire training over the 6 weeks is he plonked us into a Mazda MX-5, which if you're familiar with that car, it is slow, but it's a mid-engine thing, so it is a really well-balanced car. It's slow on purpose because it then allowed him to teach us the fundamentals of driving. And because we weren't in some crazy fast car sliding around the corners, the car can't go faster than it can go. And it was one of the biggest insight was just like straight away learning that tearing around the corners with my foot pinned to the ground isn't going to get me around this track in the fastest time. And through that 6-week process of him teaching us the principles of racing, the fundamentals of braking, and as weight distribution moves between the front and the back of a car, and how to fix grip, and all those things done inside of an MX-5, which allowed us to internalize what he was teaching us. Then on the weekend, so on the Saturday, we would then race the track live, and he had instructors that would then jump into the virtual car with you through some software, and the instructors talking in the ear, seeing what I'm seeing, and me on my racing rig, trying my best to internalize everything he's taught me, and then tearing up towards a corner, and then the guy in my ear saying, "Okay, brake now." And I wouldn't have braked at that point originally, but then as the course went through and I got to the end of it, my understanding of the fundamentals of racing had completely changed. And so once that training was finished, defining B at that point became a lot easier because I understood more. And, do I know what to do? At that point, I did. Like, my understanding at that point was, okay, I need to focus on cornering. So that's what I need to do. Do I know how to do it? Okay, maybe not. So then I'll do some research. I'll race, but I'm racing the track now with everything is about cornering. So all my focus is on trying to corner better and understanding that getting around the track in the fastest possible time, you actually end up going into corners slower, so you can accelerate faster out of the corners. And it was just all these insights just happening over time. But it maps to this, even though this is an internet business, but you can map this to other components outside of what we're teaching over here. But so that's one of the things that I'm interested in, which is racing, and I follow the same A to B principles that we're teaching over here apply to racing, and it has been transformational. So I think that's the story that I'll end on.
And that's a really good metaphor for the experience. I mean, people are going to have, the one thing I don't want to have anybody believe is that there's a right way to do this, or a way that if they're not doing it that way, somehow they're not getting the most out of it. It's not like that. Somebody could decide that they simply don't know. Using your metaphor with the racing rig, they could be in a very similar position where they are now staring at this beautiful piece of equipment and have no idea what to do with it, and then just they put themselves in the seat and realize, wow, they really have no idea what to do with it. But the analog here is, there will be some people who want to just go into the system and want to go through the material to orient to it. I probably would be one of those people. That's just sort of my nature, is that I want to get a sense of it, or I might get a sense from a few parts. I might read the intro of each thing like that. That's perfectly okay. Like, so one thing we don't want to suggest in this master class is that you have to be crystal clear about where you are and where you're going immediately out of the gate. Your initial A to B might be very much like the experience Andre just described, where you now have the thing and you're not really sure what to do with it, but you want to play with it, right? You want to experience it, and you might make a mistake, and that's fine. And you might just decide jump in and see what, turn some switches, see what stuff is. That's perfectly okay. And that could be days, that could be weeks, that could be months, that could be the better part of a year if you want to go through the content end to end. But if really this A to B that we described, that is when the priority is about progress and in sustaining progress. And progress it's not a requirement, to be clear. Like, that doesn't have to be the goal all the time, or the definition of progress can be a little fuzzy. It could just be, I just want to take 6 weeks and orient myself to the material in the system. I just want to browse around for 6 weeks and just kind of get a feel for it. Or maybe you own 2 of the 4 component parts, and you just want to take 3 or 4 weeks and explore the others. Those are all perfectly right answers if that's what works for you. I think at some point you make that transition that Andre described in his experience with the racing simulator, that at some point you start to narrow down what do I want to work on? if it's cornering, I don't know what the analog would be for cornering in the system, but if it's that, then that will reveal itself to you, and that's when that A to B, that tension begins to emerge naturally. We're like, you know what, I feel like my business needs this thing. And if you have an established business, often it's the thing that's keeping you awake at night. That's the thing calling your attention. I remember several years ago in a high level mastermind where someone, and I can't remember exactly how many, it's like 20, I think there were 30 people there. And the question was asked, how many, by show of hands, how many of you are worried about your Facebook account, about problems with your Facebook account, like about your account getting shut down or getting banned or whatever? Raise your hand. That was a time when Facebook was just really aggressive and really problematic. They still are, but they're really problematic. And I think it was 27 out of 30 people raised their hands. And that's an extreme example, but and then I think that's sort of the follow-up, or maybe the way the question was phrased is like, how many of you have woken up in the middle of the night worried about your Facebook account getting shut down or something? And maybe that was the framing. It was intense. Like, that's a really good way to figure out what B is. The absence of the thing that's keeping you awake at night, or strategies to mitigate the thing that's keeping you awake at night. If you have a business that is 100% reliant on organic traffic, and maybe it's a profoundly, it's just a great business, but you're waking up at night over and over again going, what happens if Google changes the algorithm and I lose half my traffic? Right? If that's the thing that's keeping you awake at night, that's an indicator that the thing that you need to be thinking about your A to B progression is the absence of that fear. Like, what would mitigate that concern? What kinds of things could you do? Because the taking action in that direction does a lot to mitigate the fear on its own. And figuring out and realizing that there are things to do, that you do have agency and you can make these changes. Like, that's really powerful. That creates almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So with Andre's simulator metaphor and that, my comments related to that, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Anything to add before we close this now 2-hour and 16-minute conversation, or shall we call this one a win and move on?
No, this is the win. Let's move on. This has been fun.
Thanks, everybody. As always, we appreciate your time and attention.
Yeah, man.